I want you to close your eyes for just a moment and take a deep breath. Try to recall the scent of a mosquito coil burning slowly on the porch on a humid August night. Listen closely for the metallic ring of a heavy black rotary telephone echoing from the hallway. Do you feel that sudden warm ache in your chest? That is the beautiful, bittersweet embrace of nostalgia. Today, we are going to take a long, unhurried stroll down memory lane, returning to the Japan of the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. We are going to look at 30 incredibly normal habits and daily rituals from that golden era that, to the modern world, might seem completely absurd or entirely forgotten. We are going to remember how things felt, how they smelled, and how they sounded. And please, stay with me until the very end, because our final memory, a beautiful winter ritual involving black ink and hundreds of paper cards, is the one that I believe will touch your heart the most. Before we begin our journey, let us remember how time used to flow back then. It moved so much slower, did it not? We did not have screens in our pockets demanding our attention every waking second. We had the gift of anticipation. We knew how to wait for a letter in the mail, how to wait for our favorite song to play on the radio, and how to wait for our family members to return home before we could tell them our news. There is a strange modern myth that without all this instant technology, our lives were somehow poorer or more isolated. But you and I know the profound truth. Life back then was incredibly rich with emotion, brimming with genuine human connection, and anchored in physical, tangible rituals. We interacted with our neighbors, we knew the faces of our local shopkeepers, and our homes were filled with sounds and textures that made us feel grounded. Let us step back into that beautifully imperfect, deeply human era and rediscover the magic we left behind. Let us begin with the heavy, majestic presence of the kurodenwa, the black rotary dial telephone. This was not just a device, it was the sacred centerpiece of the household. Can you feel the cool, solid weight of that heavy receiver against your ear? To make a call, you had to insert your finger into the dial, pull it all the way to the metal stopper, and listen to that satisfying, rhythmic whir as it snapped back into place. And of course, these phones were rarely left bare. Our mothers and grandmothers dressed them up like beloved pets, carefully draping intricate, hand-crocheted lace doilies over the top and the receiver to keep the dust away. Making a phone call was a public family event. The phone was tethered to a short cord in the hallway or the living room. If you wanted to call a boy or a girl you liked, you had to do it with your parents, sitting just a few feet away, sipping their tea and pretending not to listen to your nervous, trembling voice. The sheer bravery it took to dial those numbers, praying the father would not answer, is something today's generation will simply never understand. Now, let us remember the beautiful soundtrack of our neighborhoods at dusk. Long before 24-hour convenience stores existed on every corner, our food came directly to our streets. Do you remember the mournful yet comforting sound of the tofu seller's bugle, the wrapper, echoing through the narrow alleys as the sun began to set? 2 long notes followed by 1 short note. The moment you heard that sound, your mother would hand you a cold enamel bowl or a plastic container, along with a few coins, and send you running out the front door. You would stand by the man's wooden cart or his modified bicycle, watching as he carefully sliced the fragile, snow-white block of fresh tofu while it floated in cold water. It smelled so incredibly fresh, a delicate scent of soybeans and clean water. The tofu seller knew everyone's face, asking about your school day as he handed over the heavy bowl. Today, buying tofu is a silent transaction in bright supermarket aisles, but back then it was a daily community ritual tied to the setting of the sun. Think back to the rush of the morning commute and the unforgettable sound of the train stations. Before magnetic cards and digital smartphone passes, the ticket gates were manned by actual human beings, the kippu kiri. These station attendants stood in their neat uniforms inside tiny wooden booths, armed with a heavy metal hole puncher. As thousands of commuters flowed past them like a river, Their hands moved with unbelievable speed and precision. Clack, clack, clack. They punched a tiny notch into each small, stiff paper ticket without ever slowing down the line. Sometimes, to maintain their rhythm when there was a gap between passengers, they would strike the puncher against the side of their booth, creating a hypnotic, percussive beat that defined the soundtrack of urban Japan in the 70s. The tickets smelled of fresh cardboard and ink, and you had to be so careful not to lose that tiny rectangle of paper in your pocket. It is completely absurd today to imagine relying on human hands to process millions of commuters, yet they did it with a breathtaking, rhythmic grace. Let us take a walk to the Sento, the neighborhood public bathhouse. In the 1960s and 70s, many wooden houses did not have their own baths, making the Sento the beating heart of the community. You would walk through the streets at night, carrying a small plastic basin filled with your soap, a washcloth, and a bottle of shampoo. Stepping through the sliding doors, you were greeted by the friendly attendant sitting high up in the bandai booth. The moment you entered the bathing area, the heavy, warm steam embraced you, smelling intensely of alkaline soap and damp wood. Dominating the back wall was always a grand, hand-painted mural of Mount Fuji, its snowy peak watching over the echoing room. This was where neighbors bonded, where women gossiped about local news, and where children learned the etiquette of shared spaces. And the absolute best part? Emerging from the hot water, face flushed, and buying a cold glass bottle of sweet coffee milk. You would pop the paper lid off and chug it down with one hand on your hip. That perfectly chilled, sugary milk tasted like pure heaven after a scalding bath. Can you remember the discipline and the early morning dew of summer vacations? While modern children might sleep in until noon, our summers were defined by radio taiso, the morning radio calisthenics. At 6:30 in the morning, children would gather in the local park, rubbing the sleep from their eyes. We carried our precious attendance cards, worn at the edges and hung around our necks on a string. From a portable radio placed on a bench, the upbeat, energetic piano music would begin to play, accompanied by a cheerful, booming voice instructing us to stretch our arms and bend our knees. The crisp morning air, the smell of damp grass, and the synchronized movements of dozens of sleepy children formed a beautiful community bond. The ultimate goal was to get your card stamped every single day by the neighborhood leader. A fully stamped card at the end of August meant you might receive a small prize, perhaps a notebook or some cheap candy. Today, forcing children to gather in a park at dawn during their holidays seems unthinkable. But it gave our chaotic summers a beautiful, healthy structure. Listen closely to the memory of the slow-moving trucks that used to roam our residential streets. Do you remember the chanting voice coming from the loudspeaker of the Chirigami Kokan, the toilet paper exchange truck? The recording would slowly drone, calling out for old newspapers and magazines. In our homes, nothing was ever wasted. We would spend time meticulously stacking a month's worth of red newspapers, tying them into tight, heavy bundles with cheap vinyl string. When we heard the truck approaching, we would run out to flag the driver down. He would weigh our heavy stacks of old news and in exchange hand us rolls of fresh, new toilet paper. It was an incredibly brilliant, beautifully simple recycling system long before environmentalism became a global trend. The rough texture of the tied newspapers against your hands and the contrasting soft, bulky reward of the toilet paper rolls was a physical lesson in value and conservation. Trying to explain to a modern child that we used to trade old news for bathroom supplies right on our street corner sounds utterly absurd, but it was a proud household duty. As the seasons turned cold, our homes were transformed by the distinct, heavy scent of the kerosene heater, the stove. Central heating was practically unheard of, so our families relied on these metal beasts placed in the center of the living room. Your father would have to carefully fill the tank using a red plastic hand pump, squeezing it over and over, while the sharp, metallic smell of kerosene filled the cold air. But once it was lit, the glowing red coils provided a fierce, localized warmth that drew the whole family together like a campfire. And this heater had a magical secondary purpose. Our mothers would wrap sweet potatoes, yaki imo, in aluminum foil and place them right on top of the flat metal grill. As the afternoon wore on, the sweet, caramelized scent of roasting potatoes would mix with the smell of kerosene, peeling the hot, purple skin away to reveal the steaming, golden flesh inside, while your back was freezing, but your front was roasting, is a sensory memory that defines a Showa-era winter. Today, open flames and kerosene fumes in the living room would cause a panic, but to us, it was the very definition of a cozy winter. Let us remember the mornings before the sun even fully rose, marked by the delicate clinking of glass on wood. In the era before massive plastic jugs in giant refrigerators, our milk was delivered directly to our homes in small, heavy glass bottles. Outside the front door hung a small wooden box with the dairy company's logo faded into the wood. The milkman would arrive quietly in the dawn, leaving fresh bottles and taking the empty ones away. When you brought the cold bottle inside, you had to carefully use a special little tool with a sharp needle to pry off the thick paper lid, or simply push it in with your thumb. The milk at the very top was always rich and thick with cream. It tasted incredibly pure, chilled perfectly by the morning air. Rinsing the empty bottles and placing them back in the wooden box was a daily chore that taught us responsibility. It was a beautiful circle of trust between the family and the milkman, a quiet system of glass and wood that has been entirely replaced by disposable cardboard and plastic. Cast your mind back to the rhythmic, comforting clack of the wooden beads on the soroban, the Japanese abacus. Long before the cold, silent screens of pocket calculators and smartphones took over our desks, mathematics had a distinct physical soundtrack. You could walk past a primary school classroom or sit in your own living room and hear the rapid-fire clicking, a symphony of logic and discipline. The smooth wooden beads, polished by thousands of hours of touch from small fingers, held a distinct warmth. You had to physically move the numbers, to feel the weight of your calculations sliding up and down the bamboo rods. It taught us immense patience. It grounded us in the physical world, and the instrument itself smelled faintly of oiled wood and the graphite from our pencils. We did not just learn math, we learned a tactile connection to the universe of numbers. The abacus required deep focus, a straight back, and a clear mind. It is completely absurd to think how deeply connected we were to these simple wooden frames, yet they built the economic foundation of a booming modern nation. Our family lives centered around a piece of furniture that defined the era, the chabudai, the short-legged wooden table. We did not have high dining tables with individual chairs. Instead, the entire family would sit on the tatami floor upon flat sabuton cushions, our knees folded tightly beneath us. This low table was where everything happened. We ate our grilled mackerel and miso soup here. We furiously did our homework upon its polished surface, and we gathered around it to watch the heavy, wooden-encased television set in the corner. Because the table was so low, it naturally forced an incredible physical closeness among the family. You were shoulder to shoulder with your siblings. When a meal was finished, the table was wiped down, its legs were folded underneath, and it was pushed against the wall to make room for rolling out the futons for sleeping. It was a masterpiece of space-saving living. The famous trope of the angry father flipping the chabudai out of frustration exists precisely because that table was the absolute emotional center of the household's universe. Let us wander into the dimly lit, velvet-lined world of the kisaten, the traditional coffee shops of the 70s. If you stepped inside one of these establishments, you were immediately hit by an incredibly dense wall of aroma. It was a heavy, intoxicating blend of dark roasted coffee beans, sweet pancakes, and thick, billowing clouds of cigarette smoke. Back then, smoking was a completely normal, pervasive habit. Every single table in the kisaten had a glass ashtray and a branded box of matches. Businessmen, college students and artists would sit for hours upon plush, dark red velour chairs, reading thick newspapers or manga magazines, completely enveloped in a blue haze of tobacco smoke. The master behind the wooden counter would silently pour water over coffee grounds through a flannel cloth, a slow drip process that took immense patience. The clinking of porcelain cups and the quiet jazz playing from a vinyl record player created a moody, solitary atmosphere. Today, the idea of sitting in a small, unventilated room filled with smoke seems highly illegal. But back then, it was an oasis of urban tranquility. Do you recall the exact smell and taste of a Japanese summer? It was defined by the massive glass pitchers of mugicha, roasted barley tea, sitting proudly in the refrigerator. When we came running inside after playing baseball in the dirt lot or chasing dragonflies, covered in sweat and mosquito bites, our mothers would pour us a tall glass. The smell of the roasted grain was earthy, dark, and deeply comforting. The glass pitcher was always covered in heavy condensation, freezing to the touch. You would drink it down in one long gulp, the cold liquid soothing your throat, while the deafening sound of cicadas cried endlessly outside the open windows. Making mugicha was a daily ritual, boiling the water, dropping in the loose barley grains, and waiting agonizingly for it to cool down enough to be put into the icebox. It had no sugar, no artificial flavors, just the pure, roasted essence of the earth. Today's vending machines offer endless varieties of sweet drinks, but nothing will ever quench a thirst quite like the bitter, cold perfection of homemade barley tea. Think about how we used to handle empty glass bottles. Before plastic recycling bins, we had a brilliant system of coin deposits at the local sakaya, the neighborhood liquor store. When your father finished his large glass bottles of beer, or when the heavy glass bottle of soy sauce was completely empty, they were not thrown away. It was often the job of the children to carry these heavy, clinking bottles down the street back to the shop. The rough texture of the heavy-duty plastic carrying crates bit into your hands as you walked. At the store, the shopkeeper would take the empties and hand you back 10 or 20 yen per bottle. That small handful of cold coins was absolute treasure. It was immediately spent on cheap dagashi candy at the small shop next door, buying sour plums or little chocolate sticks. We were participating in a perfect, closed-loop ecological system, motivated entirely by the reward of pocket change. Explaining to youth today that empty bottles were practically an alternative currency for children seems bizarre, but it taught us the value of absolutely everything we consumed. When winter truly set in, our entire existence revolved around the absolute magic of the kotatsu. This low table, equipped with an electric heater underneath and draped in a heavy quilted blanket, was a trap of pure comfort. Once you slid your cold legs under that heavy blanket and felt the radiant heat warming your frozen toes, it was physically impossible to leave. The whole family would sit trapped around its edges, our lower halves roasting while our shoulders felt the chill of the unheated room. And upon this table sat the quintessential winter snack, a woven basket piled high with mikan, the mandarin oranges. We would sit there for hours watching television, mindlessly peeling the oranges. Your fingers would turn slightly yellow and smell sharply of bright, acidic citrus oil. The combination of the heavy heat on your legs and the sharp, sweet smell of the oranges is the undisputed aroma of a Showa-era winter. Falling asleep under the kotatsu, only to wake up parched and sweating with your mother scolding you, is a universal memory we all intimately share. Speaking of television, do you remember the physical labor required just to watch a clear picture? In the 1970s, televisions were beautiful, heavy pieces of wooden furniture with glass screens that took a full minute to warm up, starting as a small white dot that slowly expanded. We did not have digital perfection. We had rabbit ear antennas on top of the set. When the picture became fuzzy or filled with static snow, a child was usually dispatched to act as the human antenna adjuster. You would stand there, gently twisting and turning the metal rods, moving them an inch to the left, then an inch to the right, while your father yelled from the chabudai, "Stop! Right there! Do not move!" Sometimes, you had to stand in awkward positions, or wrap tinfoil around the tips just to catch a clear signal for a baseball game or the Sunday night anime. On New Year's Eve, the entire nation would tune in to watch the Kohaku Utagassen singing contest. The shared struggle of keeping the antenna perfectly still so the family could enjoy the show built a strange, frustrating, but undeniable bond. Let us recall the sounds and sensations of summer festivals, the Matsuri. We did not wear modern athletic shoes to these events. We wore traditional wooden sandals, the geta, paired with crisp cotton yukata robes. Walking in geta requires a completely different balance. You had to grip the fabric thong with your toes, and as you walked down the asphalt streets, the wooden teeth of the sandals produced a distinct, rhythmic clacking sound. Karankoron, karankoron. Hundreds of people walking toward the shrine created a wooden symphony that echoed into the humid night sky. Your feet might blister, and the wooden base was hard on your heels, but you felt deeply elegant. The air at these festivals smelled intoxicatingly of grilled squid coated in soy sauce, sweet cotton candy, and the sulfur of cheap fireworks. You would crouch down in your yukata, trying desperately to catch a fragile goldfish with a paper scoop that dissolved in the water. We accepted the physical discomfort of the wooden shoes because it was a proud, beautiful tradition that connected us directly to the earth and our ancestors. Consider the humble square of cloth that we used for absolutely everything, the furoshiki. Long before the invention of nylon backpacks or plastic carrier bags, we relied on a simple piece of beautifully patterned cotton or silk fabric. Our mothers were absolute magicians with this cloth. They could fold, twist, and tie a single flat square into a secure bag for carrying a stack of schoolbooks, a perfectly wrapped parcel for a gift, or a tight bundle to transport our daily lunchboxes. The physical act of tying the knot, pulling the fabric taut, and feeling the sturdy knot secure the items inside was a deeply satisfying, tactile experience. When you reached your destination, you simply untied the knot, and the bag magically disappeared, folding flat back into your pocket. It was the ultimate, elegant solution to carrying things. Today, the world struggles with mountains of plastic waste and disposable bags, making our old habit of using a single, washable cloth for years seem not absurd, but incredibly advanced and profoundly wise. Do you remember the sheer excitement that rippled through the neighborhood when you heard the sharp, sudden clack of wooden blocks? This was the hyoshigi, the signal that the Kamishibai man, the paper theater storyteller, had arrived on his bicycle. Though its golden age was slightly earlier, the echoes of Kamishibai lingered into the 70s in many neighborhoods. He would park his bicycle, fold out a small wooden stage attached to the back, and children would come running with their small coins. You would buy a piece of sticky sugar candy on a stick, and then the magic would begin. He would slide beautifully hand-painted cardboard pictures in and out of the wooden frame, using different voices to tell thrilling stories of heroes, ghosts, and adventures. We sat on the dirt, completely captivated by a man with paper boards, hanging on to his every word. He always stopped the story right at the most suspenseful moment, promising to return next week. In an age of high-definition screens and endless streaming, the idea of being mesmerized by a man changing paintings on a bicycle seems unimaginable. Yet it was the purest form of entertainment. Let us look at a quiet, hopeful ritual we performed before any major school trip or sports day. We would make teru teru bozu, little weather dolls crafted from white tissue paper or old rags. You would crumple up one piece of paper into a ball for the head, drape another piece over it, and tie it tightly at the neck with a piece of string. Using a black marker, we carefully drew a smiling face on the round head. Then we would hang these little ghosts from the eaves of the roof or from the window latch, their paper bodies swaying gently in the evening breeze. We would press our hands together and pray softly to the dolls, asking them to bring us clear, sunny skies for our big day tomorrow. If it rained, we might angrily draw a sad face on them. But if the sun shone bright, we would thank them by drawing pupils in their eyes. It was a beautiful, innocent superstition, a tangible way for children to feel they had some small control over the massive forces of nature. We believed in that simple paper magic with all our hearts. Finally, we arrive at the memory I promised you, the deeply beautiful, lost art of the nengaho, the New Year's greeting cards. In December, the entire nation engaged in a frantic yet deeply mindful ritual. We did not send quick, thoughtless digital messages. We sat down at the chabudai with a stack of hundreds of blank postcards. We used a solid block of sumi ink, grinding it slowly against the stone with water until it reached the perfect, dark consistency. The entire room would fill with that incredibly distinct, earthy, pine soot smell of traditional ink. With a bamboo brush, we painstakingly wrote the names, addresses, and greetings for every friend, relative, and co-worker we knew. Our hands cramped, and our fingers were permanently stained black. But on the morning of January 1st, the magic happened. The postman would arrive, his bicycle heavy with thick bundles secured by rubber bands, dropping a massive stack of cards into your wooden mailbox. Sitting by the kerosene heater, smelling the oranges, and reading the handwritten well wishes from every person in your life made you feel overwhelmingly connected, loved, and rooted in a beautiful community. When we look back at these 30 habits, from the heavy black telephones to the smell of ink on New Year's Eve, we realize something profound. We are not just mourning the loss of old objects or outdated routines. We are mourning the loss of our youth, and perhaps the loss of a time when the world required us to be deeply physically present in our own lives. We had to wait, we had to touch, we had to smell, and we had to truly look at each other. Those absurd, incredibly normal things were the invisible threads that tied our communities together. Thank you so much for taking this warm, nostalgic walk with me today. If these memories brought a tear to your eye or a smile to your face, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so we can continue to preserve these beautiful stories. Now, I would love to hear from you. Which of these 30 habits brought back the strongest memory for you? Or is there another daily ritual from Showa-era Japan that you deeply miss? Please share your personal stories in the comments below and let us remember the good old days together.